everyone, it's Jennifer from Flux. In this video, I'm going to show you how to crochet this beautiful peach tree grove scarf. This is a beautiful corner-to-corner rectangle design, and we're going to be using a yarn cake, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But that does all this beautiful color work for you. All the self-striping is just done through the cake, so you don't have to change colors, you just simply crochet. We are going to tackle this project in 3 parts. The first part, we're going to work on the bottom edge and the increase. Then we're going to work upward and create some length on our scarf. And finally, we're going to finish off the top by coming back in to create this point. Now, like I said before, this is a corner-to-corner project. So if you're not familiar with this technique, I'm going to walk you through it step by step and stitch by stitch. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle. I grabbed a stitch marker. For these corner-to-corner rectangle projects, I like to use one, but it's totally optional, and I will show you how to use it later in the video. We're going to be using a 5mm H crochet hook. This is my Furls Odyssey hook, in case you're wondering. I usually get a lot of questions about my hook. I can put links to this also for you if you'd like to check it out. And for the yarn, we're going to be using Lion Brand's mandala yarn. Now, there's lots of different mandala yarns. There's a mandala baby, there's an ombre, there's all different ones now. This is just the regular mandala, if you will. The colorway that I've chosen is called Pegasus, and it's shades of peach and coral and some lavender, teal, gray, and cream. So it's a really interesting and pretty combination. And each one of these cakes has about 590 yards of yarn, or 540 meters. This is an acrylic yarn, and it is machine wash and dry. So I always find the machine wash and dry yarns make wonderful gifts because it's not too much care for the recipient as well, just as a side note. Now, we are going to be using the recommended hook size. The 5mm H crochet hook is what they recommend, and that is what we'll be using as well. If you do need to substitute yarn, you'll just need 590 yards about of a number 3 light on the yarn weight scale for that, okay? So if you do need to substitute, just look for that 3. It's the yarn ball on the label with the little number in the center of it, okay? And then you'll need about 590 yards of that, okay? So let's get started. Our project is going to be divided into 3 parts. I'm going to show you how to work the first part to establish the width of our scarf. And at this point, you can customize the width very easily. And then we're going to learn how to work the height of our scarf. And finally, once we get past that point, I'm going to show you how to kind of finish it off to create the point at the top. Okay, now this is going to be a long rectangle, and we're going to divide it, like I said, into 3 parts. So let's scoot everything over. And I'm going to zoom way in so you can see what I'm doing here. And what we're going to do first is work our starting chain. So to do that, we need to put a slip knot on our hook. Wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop. Bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up a loop, and tighten. So the first thing we want to do is chain 6. So to make a chain, we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The next thing we're going to do is work a double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. So the loop here does not count. That's on your hook. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that 4th chain from our hook, we're going to work a double crochet. To make a double crochet, wrap yarn around hook, insert the hook into that 4th chain from the hook, bring up a loop, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops, and then for the remaining 2 chains, we're going to work a double crochet into each one of those. So work a double crochet into the next chain, and work a double crochet into the next chain, that very last chain. Okay, so row 1 is complete. And it's just our first block, okay? We're not going to worry about this tail, and in fact, I like to keep the tail on till the very end because it reminds me of where I began, and it helps to orient where I'm turning and placing my hook, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that as we move farther along in the tutorial. Okay, so let's move on to row 2. Row 2, we're also going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then what we're going to do is do the same thing. In that 6th chain from the hook, remember that loop doesn't count. Go 1, 2, 3, and 4. Work a double crochet into that 4th chain from the hook. Work a double crochet into the next chain. Work a double crochet into the next chain. Okay, so here is where we're going to join our first 2 blocks together. And remember I was telling you about that tail? That tail is helpful because what we need to do is turn our block. And the way you turn it is to turn it so that that tail is now pointing towards you. Right now it's pointing towards me. So what we need to do is locate that turning chain space. So right at the side of our block here, it almost looks like a little purse with a handle. We're going to insert the hook and work a slip stitch into that turning chain space. So insert the hook, bring up a loop. Now bring that loop through the loop that's already on your hook, okay? We need to make one more block for row 2. So to do that, we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And then in that same turning chain space where we work that slip stitch, work 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, and 3. So row 2 is complete. Now it's really easy with corner to corner to tell what row you're on because for row 1, at the beginning at least, we worked 1 block for row 1. For row 2, we worked 2 blocks. So row 2 is officially complete. And see this tail is still pointing towards us, okay? At this time it looks sort of like a little heart. Okay, let's begin row 3. Whenever you begin in this first part where we're increasing on both sides to get that width that we need, we're going to chain 6 to begin the new row. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then what we want to do is once again work a double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Work your double crochet in that 4th chain from the hook. Work a double crochet into the next chain. Work a double crochet into the next chain. So you have a total of 3 double crochets, and then we need to turn and join the block. Okay, so turn it so that that tail is facing towards you. See how handy that tail comes in when you're doing this. Okay, and then we're going to join into that first block that we come to in that turning chain space with a slip stitch. Just like that. All right, let's continue. Chain 3. Work 3 double crochet in that turning chain space where you just work that slip stitch. 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to join with a slip stitch once again in that next block that you come to, in that turning chain space. So work a slip stitch in there, and then we're going to chain 3. Because it's row 3, we're making 3 blocks. 1, 2, 3, and work 3 double crochets into that same, whoops, I need to back up. Anytime you make a stitch and things don't go quite right or it doesn't look the way you want it, feel free to pull it apart. It's much easier to do it right when it happens than to have to rip back too far. Okay, again, we're going to work 3 double crochets in that turning chain space. 1, 2, and 3. So row 3, when you're complete, it should look like a tiny little set of steps, okay? So for the rest of this first part, we're just going to work row 3 over and over. We're going to do one more row together, so just hang out for a sec. But we're going to work row 3 over and over and over. This is going to be the bottom edge of our scarf. So you're going to work row 3 until your scarf is as wide as you would like it to be, okay? So let's work one more row together and then we'll kind of depart and get your width established. So to begin row 4, we're going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then work your double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Double crochet. Next chain. Double crochet, next chain, double crochet for a total of 3 double crochet stitches. Okay, once again, we need to turn. Remember that tail, we're going to turn it so that that tail is facing us. And then you're going to join those blocks together by working a slip stitch into that first block that you come to, right in that turning chain space. Then chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to work our 3 double crochets into that turning chain space. So 1, 2, and 3. Now join with a slip stitch into that turning chain space of the next block that you come to, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and work your double crochets into that turning chain space. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, join your blocks together with a slip stitch into that turning chain space of that next block that you come to. Chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and work your double crochets in that turning chain space. So 1 double crochet, 2 double crochet, and 3 double crochet. So row 4 is complete. For row 4, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks. Okay, so just keep repeating that row that I showed you. Now you can back up the video as much as you want. You can, there's like a slow-mo feature. You can do that as well. But just keep repeating the rows that we just did over and over and over until your scarf is as wide as you would like it to be. I'm going to go ahead and work my rows, and when we rejoin, we'll measure our width, and then we'll start moving upward with the height of our scarf next. Just working that last stitch. And now we have our width established. Now you can keep going if you want yours to be a little bit wider than what I have here, but I grabbed a ruler. Mine is coming out to be about 9 inches. And let me just move my hook so I can show you here. Remember we said 1 block per row. So if you count up one side, the number of blocks up one side, that'll tell you how many rows you have. So I got about 9 inches wide, which is what I want for my scarf. And I'm going to count the blocks for you too, so you know how many rows to work if you're using this particular yarn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I worked 13 rows, and that gave me about 9 inches of width. Now again, you can work more rows if you want it to be a little bit wider, or less rows if you need it to be narrower. So the next part of our scarf, now that we have our width established, we're going to establish the length. So we're going to start working upward, okay? So let's go back up here to where we left off. So what I want to show you now is what we need to do to work upward to create that rectangular shape is to decrease on one side and continue to increase on the other side, okay? So what we're going to do is grab our stitch marker, because that's going to help us remember what side we're doing what on, okay? So let's go ahead and decrease first, okay? I'm going to show you how to do that first. So let's go ahead and make this side our increase side first, and then I'm going to show you how to decrease down here at the bottom, okay? So grab your stitch marker and just keep it kind of handy. So what we're going to do is start the row like we normally would, like we've been doing. So chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then you can kind of turn things a little bit if you need to. And we're going to work a double crochet. Let me just zoom in a little bit here. We're going to work a double crochet in that 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this part should seem very, very familiar. This is how we've been working the beginning of a new row all along. So we're just working a double crochet in that 4th chain from the hook, double crochet into the next chain, double crochet into the next chain. Then we're going to kind of turn things a bit. Remember that tail is facing us down here as we go. I left that hanging there so it could help us. And then we're going to join with a slip stitch into that first block we come to, into the turning chain space, chain 3, and keep going across the row like you normally would. Now, all right, I'm just going to keep working across the row, and when we get towards the end of this row, we're going to learn how to decrease and move upward, okay? So keep going across the row, and we'll rejoin in just a moment. All right, I'm just coming up to the end of the row here, and I'm going to work that very last block. And so it's right next to the one that we would join it to. So join it with a slip stitch into that turning chain space. Same thing you always do. But instead of continuing and putting another block, what we're going to do instead is turn our work. And then we're going to work a slip stitch into that first double crochet stitch, a slip stitch into the next double crochet stitch from the previous row, that block there, and a double crochet into the next stitch. Then you might want to turn your work a little bit onto the side, and then we're going to work a slip stitch into the turning chain space. Okay, and as you can see now, we have like a right edge and like a flat edge instead, okay, of like a continued stair step look. So what we're going to do now is chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and we're just going to continue across the row as normal. Okay, so 3 double crochets into that turning chain space. 1, 2, and 3. Join with a slip stitch in the turning chain space. And then we're just going to keep going, okay? Now, before we keep going, if as an option, you don't have to do this, but as an option, you might want to take your stitch marker and just throw it into the side here where we decreased. And that will indicate to you when you see the stitch marker to stop and decrease, okay? So you don't have to do this, and especially if you are a seasoned crocheter and have done corner to corner before, you'll know that the flat edge means to decrease, and this higher peak on the side here is where we keep increasing, okay? But it is helpful, you know, if you're going along with your project or maybe watching a movie or something, and you know that little stitch marker will just say stop, it's time to decrease. So just as an option, you can put that in. What we're going to do now is the row that I just showed you where we decrease on one side, increase on the other side. We're going to keep going with that, and what's going to happen is your scarf is going to get taller and taller and taller. So we're just going to keep working that row now until our scarf is as tall as we would like it to be. Now, if you are using a different yarn, like I mentioned before, I worked 13 rows of my increase before I started working my height, okay? So what you can do, now this is a little trick that I do sometimes, is if you have a scale, go ahead and measure your piece the way it is right now and see how much it weighs. And then if you're not sure when to stop and bring it back in, because you need about the same amount of yarn to close off the top, you can, minus the label, weigh the amount of yarn that you have left. So that's just a little trick. If you're not sure how much yarn to conserve to close it back up at the top, you can do that as well. Otherwise, if you're using the same yarn or something similar, you can go by the number of rows that I worked as well. So let's keep repeating the row that I just showed you until you get the height that you want of your scarf, or the length rather. And then we're going to rejoin. I'm going to show you how to transition onto that third part where we're going to close up the top and create that other point at the top of our scarf. Okay, I have worked some length on this scarf and I'm just making my very last block. So we're just going to chain 3 and then work 3 double crochets into that turning chain space. Same thing we've been doing. And you're just going to do this till you get the height like I've done, and then join with a slip stitch in that turning chain space in the block next to it to connect the 2 blocks together, okay? Now I have made my scarf, if we open it up here, mine is about 70 inches long, just to give you an idea. Now I did mention when you're doing these corner to corner long rectangles, sometimes it can be hard to know when to stop doing your height and start decreasing to create that last point. But what I did was on the first part, the part 1 where we just increased on both sides, I think I mentioned this earlier, I weighed the yarn and it was about 1/2 ounce. So I continued my height until I had about 1/2 ounce, or a little bit more just for a little cushion there. But I have about 1/2 ounce of yarn left, okay? You can use just like a little kitchen scale or something like that. But just to give you an idea, because you're going to use about the same amount of yarn for part 3 as you did for this beginning part for part 1, this first little corner here. Okay, so what we want to do now to close off the top, now let me just show you what we have here. We've worked all the way up, and now we need to bring the two sides together. Okay, so we've just been decreasing on the one side over here and increasing on the other side. So instead of doing another block up here and doing the chain 6 and starting the new row, what we're going to do is start decreasing on both sides. So before we were increasing on one side, decreasing on the other side. Now we're going to decrease on both sides, and what that's going to do is bring this side up and this side across and finish off our scarf, okay? So what we want to do now that we've connected the two blocks together, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see, is instead of creating another block, what we're going to do is simply turn our work like this, and then we're going to slip stitch in each one of these double crochets. And then we're going to slip stitch in each one of these double crochets across, okay? So slip stitch in the first double crochet, slip stitch in the next double crochet, slip stitch in the next double crochet, and then you're going to slip stitch in that turning chain space. Just like that. And now we're ready to start the new row. So all you're going to do is chain 3. So 1, 2, 3, and then you're just going to continue across like you normally would. So work 3 double crochets into that turning chain space, 1, 2, and 3, and then you're just going to continue across like we have been doing, okay? So work a slip stitch in there, and then keep going. Now once we get towards the end of this row, I'm going to show you how to finish off the row 2, and then you'll know how to finish up your scarf. All right, so I've worked across, and you can start to see too, we have like a right angle now on the other end of our scarf. So I just need to work that last block. So we're just going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to work our 3 double crochets in that turning chain space, 1, 2, and 3. And then all we're going to do is join in the turning chain space with a slip stitch, just like that. And instead of continuing outward, once again, because we're decreasing on this side as well, and then we're going to slip stitch into each one of these 3 double crochets along the side. So slip stitch, slip stitch, slip stitch, and then slip stitch again in that turning chain space on that top of that block there. And then you're ready to continue another row. So if you need to see this row again, you can back it up as many times as you like, or slow motion it, or whatever you'd like to do. But what we're going to do is we're going to be repeating this row now over and over and over. And what will start to happen is you can already see it happening on either side, is it's going to start to come up and come up to a point. So when we get almost to the end, when we're on that very last block, we'll rejoin and I'll show you how to finish everything off. So our scarf is coming along beautifully, and if you used a cake like I did, these color changes have been so fun and exciting to kind of work through, and it makes the project just really move along quickly. So keep working your row and we'll rejoin in just a minute. All right, so I've been working my scarf. I'm almost to the very, very end. So I'm just going to work, this is the second to last block or the second to last row as well. I'm just working that last block of this row, my 3 double crochets, and then I'm going to join with a slip stitch in that turning chain space. And now, if you can see here, let me zoom in a little. We have just one little block to put here at the top, okay? So we're going to turn our work. And if you remember, we worked a slip stitch in each one of these double crochets across the row. So slip stitch, slip stitch, slip stitch, and then work a slip stitch in that turning chain space. And now we're at the right spot to finish our square. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then work your 3 double crochets into that turning chain space. 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to join with a slip stitch and connect it to the block that's right next to it. And now our scarf is complete. It looks awesome. Okay, so let's grab, now as you can see, I have just a tiny little bit of yarn left, not a lot. If you like, you could add a little fringe or some pom-poms to your scarf or some tassels, but I'm going to cut the yarn, and you can use these scraps for other things as well. And then go ahead fasten off and pull the yarn through. And then all we have to do is weave in some ends. So grab your tapestry needle, and if you did self-striping yarn like I did, what you'll want to do is stay in the same color area. So right here on the end I have some very pale peach. So I want to stay in that pale peach area as I weave in my ends. If I go down into this cream color area, I won't have, this peach end will show. It'll just look like a peach line through my work. So I don't want to do that. So try to stay in the same color area as you weave in your ends. So I'm just going to go, I went in one direction, and I'm going to come back in the other direction, and then just snip the yarn, give it a little tug, a snip, and then you can kind of straighten it back out. Repeat for the rest of your ends, and then we're going to kind of reveal the rest of our scarf in just a minute. So all of our ends are woven in, and if you used a removable stitch marker like I did, you can go ahead and remove that now. And so we have a beautiful, very fun, colorful scarf, and I'm loving it. I love the texture, and the stitches are plain enough to show off the color changes, but they're still visually interesting to look at. So I hope you enjoyed this pattern, and that is how you crochet the Peach Tree Grove scarf. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again.